I've noticed that a lot of times when I'm talking digital rights, for some reason, it always happens on a Tuesday. I've noticed that has happened um, for a little bit now. I can think of at least 2 or 3 occasions. So I'm noticing a trend. So I use the hashtag Digital Rights Tuesday, and today is no different. We got some digital rights issues to go through today, and we're going to be talking to Leah from Fight for the Future. You know that Fight for the Future is an amazing digital rights organization. They do amazing work. I've had the honor to collaborate with them on a couple campaigns, and Leah is going to walk us through some stuff that is going on with proctoring software. So Leah, what's up? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Ron, great to be here.
Good to see you. And so let's get right into it. There's a couple different companies involved here. One of the big ones is a company called Proctorio, which sounds like it's just the Italian word for proctologist. And as someone who's on the Duolingo app trying to get better at Italian, I just thought, well, I might need to know how to say that. But it's not that. It is software that proctors exams, but it's a bit dystopian, isn't it? Why don't you walk everybody through exactly what this stuff is and why it's a concern?
Yeah, absolutely. So e-proctoring is something that has become popular throughout the COVID-19 pandemic with the shift to remote learning. In particular, universities that previously really relied on in-person classes that are incredibly expensive to attend, hello student debt, are having to switch to online and concerned about the legitimacy of the education that they're offering to students through online learning versus having it be in person, which is traditionally how higher education is done. And so in this space, a whole range of people who have worked on stalkerware apps, spyware apps, the sort of apps that an abusive partner would install on the phone or the laptop of their partner to monitor what they do, saw an opportunity. And that opportunity is to stalk students when they're taking exams, and sometimes even when they're just doing coursework, by taking over their computer, reading the files on it, by accessing their entire web history, by filming them, by using racially biased facial recognition algorithms on them, and by forcing them to do scans of their room, their laps, wherever they are. There's a whole lot of issues with this technology, the largest of which I think is that there is no, and I mean zero, independent research that shows that these apps actually prevent the cheating that they say that they do. Basically, we have a whole bunch of unethical spyware and stalkerware apps that have sold their technology to hundreds of universities around the world to be used by millions of students, violating their rights and their privacy, and nobody really even knows if it works. I mean, the companies selling it say that they do, but that's really all we've got here.
They might be a little biased. And well, and this sounds exactly like what was going on with the facial recognition campaign. Once again, there was no documented evidence out there that facial recognition makes anybody safer. Most cases, it was being abused and misused. Cops were using it to try to find information on an ex or something like that. And then you had all these instances where it got mismatches most of the time anyway. And we're seeing that again here. Here's a couple examples of what we're talking about here. So this is ExamSoft is the company in question here. They have some privacy and facial recognition concerns. This article is from VentureBeat. Now, they go through a story here where this person was not picked up by the software because the person because of their skin tone. So basically, this is meant for the skin tone that it recognizes the most is white. So sometimes Black people and people of color, this software will just not pick them up, and it won't register that anybody is there. Is that what's going on in this case?
Yeah, that's accurate. And it is really accurate to point to facial recognition and the concerns around that technology here, because to a large extent, that technology is the same thing the e-proctoring apps are used to like verify identity and like track eye movements or facial twitches or emotion or any of these bizarre, invasive, weird AI things that they're purporting to do that have to do with, you know, cheating or educational legitimacy. It's funny because like with proctoring apps specifically, they know to a large extent that the phrase facial recognition is toxic, and that people know that this technology is bad and that it is racist. And so because of that, you'll see these technologies have marketing materials that call it facial detection, facial analysis. It's all the exact same thing.
Of course.
It's just like this.
Of course they did that now.
Absurd marketing spin on to try and hide from the fact that they have some pretty racist technology embedded within these apps that are flagging, either telling people of color that they don't have a face, or flagging them as cheating more often and sending them to the professor to review as potential cheaters more often, subjecting them to additional scrutiny.
So, because that's another thing that happens here, and let's go down to this part as well. Here's something that happened. Now, another thing that's very common in facial recognition software is it's very susceptible to hacking. And there have been cases where this software has been hacked at borders, and a bunch of sensitive information was leaked about a bunch of people. Now, here's something that's happened with this proctoring software. Security is also in question. On July 27th, remote proctoring software company Proctor, how many of these companies are there, by the way, was hacked, and the data breach exposed the personally identifiable information of 400,000 people. So imagine that getting into hands where it shouldn't be. And it's just susceptible to hacking.
It's out there like that. That information, once it's leaked, and again, I know that other guests have probably gone over this with your audience, but we have to remember that you can't change your face like you can change a credit card number. That's just not a thing. And so now that this information, which could be everything from name, address, social security number, biometric scans of face, how they did on their tests, where they took their tests, how old they are, like hair color, gender, like this searchable database of 400,000 people, and their identities, who they are, how they did on the tests, and is all out there to be exploited. And those people can't necessarily change that information. It's a gross abuse of power, and that data shouldn't have been collected in the first place. And yet here we are with, you know, Proctorio, for example. If you look at it, well, it's hidden from the Google Chrome store, actually. You can only get it through a special link at getproctorio.com. But it has a cumulative 1-star review, and 2 million installs. So to give you an idea of the scale of this worldwide, it's massive. It's an entire generation of young people who are being told that they are guilty until they're proven innocent, and that they have no right to privacy. And that's fundamentally a flaw in like the future of our nation and our democracy and our freedom. So
you sent this to me. Now, there is a Twitter account that keeps tabs on the complaints of Proctorio, and they also, I think, tweet on their own as well, but they're kind of curating different concerns around Proctorio. Let's take a look at this. So here's one. Professor using Proctorio for one of the midterms said, I said it. This one freaked me out. Now, professor using Proctorio for one of those midterms said, I set it to where you can't move your lips. It may think you're talking to someone. Ma'am, says the tweeter here, Brendan, ma'am, I'm just reading the questions. I haven't been in school in a hot minute, Leah, and I don't know if you were these people, but I was totally one of those people that talked to myself constantly during an exam. Not super verbally, but if I was alone doing it remotely because of the circumstance the world finds itself, I would totally be talking to myself.
Yeah, and this is a whole other huge issue, because there are there are a lot of professors out there who have been doing what they do for a very long time. They're people who function in a specific way in their role as an instructor, and don't really learn new technology, or like they're a lot of TLDR, a lot of these people have trouble opening a Google Doc or logging into their own email. And yet, like, they're being served this technology where they can check all of these boxes without understanding anything to do with what they're checking boxes on or how it works. And the result of that is exactly that, what's illustrated there. Like if your lips move, you must be cheating. So for any student who may not be the ideal perfect student, who is white, who is abled, who has a private quiet room in a house with a stable internet connection to take this exam, no children, no pets, no interruptions, and silence. There's you will be subjected to additional scrutiny with your professor arbitrarily checking these boxes of what they think cheating may or may not be. And that's so problematic on a number of levels, because what it does is it takes the racism, ableism, and elitism of the university setting, and it packages it up nicely into an algorithm so that professors, administrators, etc., can point to the computer and say, the computer did it. I didn't do it. When in reality, algorithms are simply humans teaching computers how to make decisions, and we're teaching them our own biases. And it's absurd. It's truly absurd.
So to kind of sum up all the things that go on here, first of all, the just privacy concerns in general, where these databases are susceptible, they're getting hacked. This has happened with general facial recognition. It's happening here, and it's very sensitive info. There's that one case where over 400,000 people were exposed. That's a lot. And not just that, but there's no evidence that this actually prevents so-called cheating. There's no evidence it's actually doing that. And just imagine, and I think the Twitter account really sums this up nicely because it's all tweets from students. Imagine the stress that is totally unnecessary that you're putting on students, in addition to the stress they're already under. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like going through school right now in the world that we're in, where it's online. You don't know when you're going to be going back. My editor, Joe, is in college, and I know it's really stressful what he's going through. He tells me about it some. And on top of that, it's test day. You're already nervous because it's test day. That's stressful. And you got to worry about, the software's not picking me up. It doesn't think I'm here. I can't take my test. I got to do something with the lighting. Oh, my lips just moved because I'm thinking out loud a little bit because I'm isolated and in a room. Now it thinks I'm cheating. This is just a recipe for disaster. Now, has academia responded to this at all? Do they hear these concerns? Do they share any of them? Has there been anything like that?
Yeah, even at the very beginning of this, there were faculty and staff at university administrations speaking out against these tools, pointing to the problems with bias and invasiveness. And several of those folks are either have received cease and desist letters from lawyers at these companies, and in one case, there's even a staff member who's being sued for speaking out against Proctorio in particular. So let's start there. That's really messed up.
Well, if you are an educator, your first priority should be the students. And first priority should be providing an education to people. And so if you're expressing concerns about different technology that are being used and you get sued for it, or you can get sued for it, yeah, that's very messed up. That is very, very messed up.
Yeah, that would be a slap lawsuit, and that's a guy at the University of British Columbia who's being sued and had his savings totally drained in the effort to defend himself and his speech. in that way. And it's also concerning because there have been a lot of other abuses to silence criticism, everything from getting an 18-year-old student's tweets taken off Twitter by abusing the Twitter like DMCA copyright takedown process to just last week, actually, Proctorio has been using the Freedom of Information Act to go around all the universities in the US that it provides its services to and demanding a list of names of anybody who has approached the university about them. And so that's almost like it's like the creation of an enemies list or something like that for potential other lawsuits or intimidation. And I have to say, like the popular tide is really turning against proctoring apps at this point. And I believe that we're about to see some really bad behavior on their part because they're starting to recognize that they're in a fight for their existence and a fight that really, if there's any justice in this world, they're bound to lose.
Well, let me ask you about the history, because this is one of those things where I wasn't even aware this was a common thing that was around until the Fight for the Future campaign. Have proctoring apps like this, have they been around for a while and now they're just really in the spotlight because of the pandemic? Or are some of these newer startups that are happening in response to the pandemic? Or, is it a little bit of both, or is it more of one or the other? Or what's kind of the history behind this stuff?
Yes, there have been proctoring apps that were similarly problematic previously, but the scale of adoption during the pandemic has grown so much that there are the existing companies, there are new companies jumping on the bandwagon, and then there are also companies like McGraw-Hill, the textbook company, that are entering into partnerships with proctoring companies and adding their tools to like the educational backend so that any professor that uses their technology just has to check a box in order to add Proctorio to it. So there's a lot of money here. And it seems like every unethical company under the sun that has to do with education is flocking to capitalize on it, despite the fact that there's no evidence that it actually works.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's go to this real quick. Now, Evan Greer, who is the deputy director of Fight for the Future and a friend of the show, she's been on the show a few times. She tweeted this out recently, so this is pretty breaking, and this goes into what we're talking about. She says, "Stop stalking your student." Now, DePaul is being sued over facial recognition tech used for online test proctoring. Now, I know this is pretty breaking, but what's going on here?
Yeah, it's interesting. There has been a really limited amount of disclosure about what these apps are doing and collecting from students, and it came out in January that the Respondus system that DePaul was using to proctor tests, etc., actually has been collecting biometric information on every student that takes those tests and storing it for up to 4 years. And there's a law in that state that about disclosure and consent to collecting of biometric information that has been completely violated, and students are very, very correct to file a lawsuit over this, because basically the software itself that the university sort of haphazardly and quickly invited in to be a part of its tests and a part of the learning experience, it didn't disclose what it was doing, and now rightfully they're being sued for taking all this data and information from students, storing it, doing who knows what with it, and never telling them.
So would this be a class action effort? Is that how this will be carried out?
I believe so. I've only read that article once quickly right before hopping on with you, but there's a lot of grounds for class action suits I would say throughout the country, especially from students of color and students, differently abled students, disabled students, I should say.
Where else can people go to get involved with the different campaigns you all got going on and to learn more?
So fightforthefuture.org is the catch-all. You'll find many links to our campaigns there. If you're interested in the subjects that we've talked about specifically here, you can go to baneproctoring.com to learn a little bit more about McGraw-Hill's relationship with Proctorio, and maybe send them a tweet telling them that it's a totally horrible idea. And you can also check out, this is a long one, but for a reason, Proctorio is worse than a proctology exam.com. And that lays out the case for why it should be an absolute embarrassment for any university, for anyone to have a relationship with Proctorio at all. It is probably one of the most damning websites I've ever seen. And so if you haven't yet, Proctorio is worse than a proctology exam.com. Go check it out.
I can't believe that URL wasn't already scooped up. Kudos for getting it.
Seriously.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and